Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. Today we're back on the third dev server for updates 1.81 and we're having a look at a familiar face. This is the I-225. Now I had a look at it back on the second dev server and there was definitely something wrong with its flight model. It seems like this time the I-225 has been fixed, but also it has a BR change. This thing has now gone from 5.7 to 6.3. Putting it in the leagues of the late-tier Griffin Spitz, and also the late-tier stuff such as the P-51H. Now, even though it has an incredibly powerful engine, if we have a look at its X-ray, 1750 horsepower, with the four 20mm Shivaks, and also the liquid and oil cooling systems, putting it at 6.3, I'm not exactly sure that was a good move, and we'll get into that later in the video. But right now, armor, once again, the only thing that's armored on this vehicle is the seats, and then the modifications, the only thing to really dabble with is the offensive 20mm. Now, as I said before, with all of the rounds, I normally take armored targets right now, but it really depends on the person you talk to when it comes to the Shivaks. A lot of people say that the Shivaks aren't very good. I personally think that they're alright, and generally with the Shivaks, I always compare, like, the baseline 20mm for me is the Hispano, so if it's better than the Hispano, then for me it's doing okay, and the Shivak is right now doing better than the Hispano. But what I want to do with this new BR change, I want to show you what other vehicles sit around 6.3 that this thing will fight. So if we go to aviation, because you're not really going to use this in ground forces, since it doesn't have any secondaries, and at 6.3, for the army, for the Soviets, you have the T-44, which is a tank which is definitely past its best because of all the tanks which have been added around it. You have the IS-2, which is pretty good, the Mod 44, ASU-85, a useful tank destroyer, but still a tank destroyer, and the Su-100, once again, an okay tank destroyer. So at 6.3 you don't have a great lineup. The two great lineups around this BR are the 5.7 one for the Soviets and the 7.0 one with the T-44-100. And if you're at 7.0, you don't take the I-225, you take the MiG, or you can just take the Yak-17. It's very odd that this machine has the same BR as these Yak-15s. I feel like people have just forgotten about these vehicles, because these three here are monsters once you get them upgraded, but it seems like nobody flies them. Anyway, let's look at its competition then in aerialistic, which is where you're going to be flying it. So for America, if you face the Americans, you're going up against the P-51H. P-51H is an absolute monster. It has a 1580 horsepower engine. It has very similar statistics to the I-225, apart from its it feels a lot lighter in the air, and it's incredibly more maneuverable. And also, you could argue it has slightly better ammunition. When we go to the Germans don't have a counterpart at 6.3. And this is the problem with the 6.3 BR in general. Because the Germans don't have a counterpart, and they're one of the nations that you see a lot of, what happens with 6.3s is you either get dragged up into 7.0s, so ME-262 territory and Radeon territory, or you get down-tiered into 5.7 and 5.3 and do really well. So there's a weird ground for 6.3. And most of the time you will get up-tiered, so, you'll get kind of screwed. But still, your competition is the ME-262, which I think in the I-225 you're not exactly competitive against, because this thing is definitely designed much more for energy fighting and not more maneuverability, where the P-51H and the Griffin Spitz are very much designed to be both. But, your matchup against stuff like the TARS and the Focke-Wulst and the Bf-49 should be really good. Then we go into Britain, and basically the British planes that you will be fighting are the Griffin Spitz, if you are fighting them. The Griffin Spitz should have you by number. They should absolutely annihilate you. And then we go to the Japanese, and the Japanese have the Ki-84 High, the J7W1, and also stuff like the Ki-94-2 and the Kicker. I think the matchup between the I-225 and these machines should actually be quite a fun one, if I'm honest. There's always something really fun about fighting the Japanese in realistic. It's always a really good challenge at the higher tiers, and hopefully that's the same for the Soviet vehicle. But for me, when I look at what it will face, I see it matching up badly against the Americans, matching up badly against the Germans, matching up badly against the British, and I would say even ground with the Japanese. So overall, it's gone from a situation where at 5.7, where it was, at the same tier of early Griffin Spitz, that it would be a very fun, high-altitude fighter that could dive. Now we're in a situation where it's going to be put up against fighters which can do exactly the same thing as it, apart from they also have that extra maneuverability, which will put it out of the game. And that's the problem with this machine, or at least the problem that I see with this. The camouflage, it only has this standard one since it was a prototype, and the repair cost is pretty low, to be honest. And I say it's pretty low because let's compare it to the P-51H. The P-51H, 16,000. The same BR, the I-225, it's half of that. And my P-51H isn't even fully upgraded yet. It's missing some of these secondary armaments. So count yourself lucky in this machine. Anyway, let's take it into Mission Editor and just show you how it definitely flies better than it did before. The issue that it was having before is that it was veering to the left a lot. It was as if the engine was not mounted in the center of the vehicle, so it was quite hard to do a full review on it. In that video, though, I did stress that it would be a good high-altitude fighter. It did feel nice, apart from the turning aspect, and I still stick to exactly what I said before. What you're going to get out of this machine is basically what the old I-185 was, apart from it's going to go up against competition now, which is going to be able to do exactly the same thing as you. At 5.7, this thing will be able to outclimb a lot of machines, get itself into a good advantageous position, and be able to match up well with the Soviets that it would fight with, so they could create the nest and you could come in and dive and support them and basically annihilate everybody while they tie everybody up. Now, at 6.3, the support you have are Levechkin 9s and MiG-9s, so obviously the MiG-9s will be great, but you can't play that playstyle. You'll be pushed into this pseudo-maneuverable mode, and if you're pushed into that, then what you'll find is that this thing is not really built for that. What this thing is built at is for high-altitude maneuverability, good dive, and decent response in the dive. And those factors, when you're going to face jets, are not really going to matter too much. Now you can see, it's still pretty maneuverable. It still is okay. But the problem is, against a jet that won't matter. Because the one thing I could do at 5.7 in this machine against other aircraft is I could go way faster than them. I'd be able to pull harder, I'd be able to do a hell of a lot to these propeller planes. But against the jets, the playstyle against the early jets is nothing like it is against propeller aircraft. Instead, what you're going to find is you're going to be at a massive disadvantage when it comes to speed. You're never really going to catch them, and what you're going to have to focus on is deflection shots and also hoping to catch them out. And so what we see from this I-225, because of mainly the BR change, is a situation where it goes from an aircraft which was given the, what would be the word, it was given the opportunity to be aggressive and offensive and be able to set up kills, where now, because of its BR, is going to change much more into a defensive-minded fighter, which is going to be more designed for the counterattack. Which is, alright. It really depends on the playstyle. I personally like my Soviet fighters being aggressive. I like the fact that they can be in your face, they can be maneuverable, and they can push hard. Right, so reduced speed is about 800, which isn't good. That's bad. P-47 can easily outdive you. Oh dear, so can the Germans. Oh, very dear. So they've taken what I thought would be really cool about this aircraft and just kind of annihilated it, and just made it like every other Soviet aircraft, where it doesn't have a good enough high speed, it doesn't have, you know, it has, basically what we have here is a Yak, or a MiG, or a Levechkin, which has a better climb rate and a better acceleration. But all the other factors which I talked about, you know, before, the idea of the maneuverability and speed, which was going to be incredibly key, especially against these high-tier vehicles, well, unfortunately it doesn't seem to exist as much as I wished it would. It is still going to be a fun play, you know. It has the characteristics. It has good energy retention. It has a decent maneuverability up to a point. The rudder is obviously an issue, but everything else is fine. It also has a cockpit. Let's just slow down and show you the cockpit, because it does open up and close, which is nice. But it is like it'll just now perform like every other Soviet fighter does at its BR. And if you like that, you know, good for you. For me, I would have liked something a little bit different. You know, I would have preferred a plane which gave me something slightly different. That was what was nice about the I-185 at the day. What happened with it is you had a good contrast. You had the Yaks, you had the Levechkins, which would set up this bee's nest, and then the I-185s would come down and annihilate. Now, I thought this was going to be that similar playstyle. I think it still has the opportunity to, but at 6.3, there are now going to be fighters in the air which are going to be able to do what you do, but just significantly better. And if they take away the fact that this thing could fight Britain and America, then what you're just going to end up in is you're either going to be slaughtering people at 5.7, such as Bf 109s and TARs, or at least you should do, or you're going to be up-tiered into jets. And I personally don't like the jet propeller dynamic. I would personally still, to this day, even though they've added in a lot more super props and stuff like that, I would still like a definitive line between propellers and jets. It won't be fun facing Me-262s in order to... it won't be fun facing Me-262s in order to be able to mod this thing out. Maybe when it's fully upgraded, you can do stuff like this and be able to, you know, use that Soviet maneuverability like you want to. But against jets, they'll just run rings around you. If you've ever played something like a J7 or a Ki-94, something that's designed to be high altitude, come down on an enemy, batter them, go back up, and then eventually, when there's only a few enemies left, set it up so you are, you know, you're in a position to kill them, and then you can maneuver with them because you have more, what's the word? Because you have more energy than them, which is basically this. It's great against other props, and it works really well. But against jets, you find out that you can't just bleed them of energy. And if you are bleeding them of energy, then generally that's a pilot issue and not a jet issue. But yeah, if you like the style of Soviet aircraft, if you like stuff like the LA-9, the MiGs, the Yaks, any of the other Levechkins, you'll enjoy this thing. You really will. But if you wanted something different, which may change, you know, the meta, or may give you another idea, kind of like how you have the contrast between the Tempest and the Spitfire, unfortunately, this machine is not going to give you it. And if it does, the only way it's going to give you it is in the form of, as you can see, high-speed maneuverability. Overall, I had high hopes for this plane, and with the BR change and with everything else, it's not looking the best. But I still have my hopes high for these weird and wonderful Soviet prototypes. I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time.